pulling their hair out are exactly the people who are dismayed about having a real reformer come into the FBI.
Kash Patel's only qualification is because he agrees with Donald Trump.
Joe Biden, for 50 years in public office, has always pridefully boasted about his word as a Biden. And I guess we now know that his word as a Biden is trash.
Hunter was singled out, and because his last name was Biden, because he was the president's son. That's what we saw.
Hello, I'm Caitlin Huey-Burns in Washington. Welcome to America Decides. With major changes looming at the Justice Department, President Biden has wiped away the prosecution of his own son, Hunter. Biden repeatedly pledged he would not issue the sweeping pardon, but did so anyway last night. Hunter Biden was convicted in June on felony charges related to his purchase of a gun in 2018. He also pleaded guilty to 9 tax evasion charges in a separate case in September. On social media, President-elect Trump called the pardon, quote, an abuse and miscarriage of justice. Trump previously pardoned his son-in-law's father, Charles Kushner, who he now has picked to be ambassador to France. But the pick that's sending shockwaves through Washington right now is Kash Patel for FBI director. He's a hardline Trump loyalist who has called the agency he hopes to lead a, quote, threat to the people. Let's start tonight with my CBS News colleagues, Nancy Cordes in West Palm Beach, Florida, and Ed O'Keefe at the White House, covering this all for us. Ed, I want to start with you because the president has said for months that he wasn't going to pardon his son. Let's play the tape.
Will you accept the jury's outcome, their verdict, no matter what it is?
Yes.
And have you ruled out a pardon for your son?
Yes. I'm not going to do anything. I said I abide by the jury decision, and I will do that. And I will not pardon him.
So, Ed, how is he explaining this?
In a lengthy statement that he issued late Sunday before leaving for Africa, Caitlin, he lays out that, in his belief, quote, no reasonable person who looks at the facts of Hunter's case can reach any other conclusion than he was singled out only because he's my son. And that is wrong, he says. He says that over the last several years, his Republican opponents, his critics, have been trying to break Hunter in order to break him, and that enough is enough. So, in essence, signaling that once he'd made this decision, the White House claims over this past weekend, he figured he might as well just announce it now instead of waiting. But the reality is his son was facing sentencing on December 12th in the gun case in which he was found guilty in June up in Delaware, and would have faced sentencing as well in a federal tax evasion case out in California, where he faced sentencing on 9 charges to which he pled guilty in September.
And, Ed, we haven't heard the president speak. He is now in Angola. But the First Lady, Jill Biden, did respond very briefly. I want to play some of that.
Dr. Biden, what changed on the pardon for Hunter?
All right, so as she's showing the Christmas decorations there, I'm curious what you make of that comment and what you make of the timing, or what we should make of the timing of this announcement.
It is the holiday season around here, Caitlin, and the decorations were unveiled early this morning. You should see the big tree in the Blue Room. And she was sharing the unveiling with the families of National Guard members from across the country. The Biden family, of course, the National Guard's family, because Beau Biden once served. Surrounded by children, she finally responded to 3 questions we reporters had shouted at her by saying, of course, she supports the pardon. But that was it. There are questions about what she knew about this, why she, the president, the press secretary, and others in the Biden orbit had insisted that this would never happen, and why it has now happened. It happened again at the beginning of a week where the president is overseas in Africa, doesn't get back here until Thursday. It would have been another week before Hunter Biden was set to be sentenced in Delaware, and then the following week would be the sentence in December. So why exactly now? He claims in his statement it's because he made the decision over the weekend and just wanted to get it over with. Okay, fine. But normally these kinds of presidential pardons come either closer to the holidays or right at the end of a presidency. So to do this now is to keep his son out of courtrooms over the next several weeks and therefore never have him enter the federal penitentiary system. And that's part of what makes this pardon so different, is not only is it so sweeping in that it covers 10 years of time and potential wrongdoing and convicted wrongdoing, but also came before he served any jail time at all. That is a big difference compared to most presidential pardons, which are given to people usually after they've been sentenced or served time.
Yeah, and Nancy, you're in West Palm Beach covering the transition. And I mean, our viewers will remember that Trump previously pardoned his son-in-law's father, who is now his pick to be ambassador to France. I'm wondering how the Trump team is responding to this Hunter Biden news at all.
Trump himself has been uncharacteristically muted on this pardon, especially given how much time Trump has spent over the past, not just 4 years, but 8 years, really talking about Hunter Biden. He posted on social media last night, shortly after Biden announced this pardon, that he wanted to know whether January 6th defendants would also be covered by this pardon, which, of course, they are not. But beyond that, Trump hasn't had much to say. Certainly people around him have reacted. In fact, his own son said that he always assumed that Trump would pardon his son, Biden rather would pardon his son. It was just a question of when it would be most politically advantageous for him and for his party. But Trump himself hasn't had much to say, potentially because, as you pointed out, he has in the past pardoned his own son-in-law's father, someone who just this weekend he announced will be serving him in this new administration as ambassador to France, one of two of his daughter's father-in-laws who he is naming to posts, the other being his daughter Tiffany Trump, who recently got married. Her father-in-law is going to be serving as a top advisor on Middle East issues in the White House.
Yeah, all in the family there a little bit. Ed, we are hearing from one of those IRS whistleblowers in the Hunter Biden case more about this pardon. I want to play a little bit of that interview.
The crimes are very serious, and this isn't singling out one individual. You can go on a Department of Justice tax website and pull up press releases with 10, 20, 30 in the last couple months of people who have been charged criminally of tax evasion or filing false tax returns, where the numbers aren't even close to what were in the Hunter Biden case, and they were prosecuted, and many of them served time in jail.
So, Ed, this seems to be a response to the president saying that Hunter Biden was kind of singled out by the Justice Department.
Yeah, it is. And Gary Shapley was among those that had first sort of blown the whistle on what exactly the IRS had discovered, taking it to Congress and blowing the case open a little more. In essence, as the Biden team would argue, the Hunter and President Biden team would argue, putting more undue political pressure on the Justice Department to continue pursuing the charges against Hunter Biden. To Shapley's point, yes, there are many who have faced tax evasion charges and have served time and have not received a presidential pardon. There are others who have not. And the broader argument that the president was making, based in part, it would appear, on a 30-page document that Hunter Biden's attorneys had released on over the weekend to sort of retell the story of the 7-year legal saga he's faced, is that, had he not been a Biden, had he not been the president's son, had he not been a Democrat in this era, he may not have been pursued the way he has been, given that the special counsel, who was left in place as U.S. Attorney in Delaware by President Biden, but was appointed there by President Trump, had started looking into this. I can remember being in Wilmington, Delaware about 4 years ago this time. It was just about as cold and dark when Hunter Biden had conceded that he was the subject of an ongoing investigation. Bill Barr at the time refused to establish or appoint a special prosecutor. It steamrolled and continued into the Biden years, which is why he kept that U.S. attorney in place. You'll recall he only sought special counsel level in the past year. But it was people like Shapley at the IRS who were saying this is a case that has to be looked into seriously, no matter the fact that he's the president's son. So that argument will continue now into history. And what the president has done today, is, and there's big concern about this among whistleblowers, among other legal experts, among fellow Democrats tonight, that what the president has done may further erode Americans' belief in what is supposed to be a fair and equal justice system, because it may, just play on the belief that the wealthy and well-connected are the only ones who can get off.
Yeah, Nancy, this all comes, of course, as Trump announced over the weekend that he's picking Kash Patel to lead the FBI. I want to get a little bit of kind of who he is and what the controversies surrounding him are, but I also want to play some sound from Republican senators who returned to Capitol Hill today who seem to be praising this pick.
I think Kash Patel is a very strong nominee. I think the entire slate of cabinet nominees President Trump has put forward is very strong. I believe every one of these cabinet nominees is going to be confirmed by the Senate. I think Kash Patel is going to be confirmed by the Senate.
There are serious problems at the FBI. The American public knows it. They expect to see sweeping change, and Kash Patel is just the type of person to do it.
Every president has the opportunity to decide who he wants to offer a nomination for. So all of the nominations coming through, the president has the right to do.
So Kash Patel isn't necessarily a household name, though he soon could be. Who is he, and why is he so controversial?
Well, Caitlin, he is 44 years old. He served in a variety of top roles in the first Trump term at the Department of Defense, at the Director of National Intelligence Office, even within the White House at the National Security Council. And he is a longtime Trump loyalist who has talked very openly about wanting to clean house at the FBI. That's something that Republicans like. But he's also talked about wanting to go after Trump's perceived enemies using the FBI, rooting out, as he puts it, anybody who targeted Donald Trump. And he said that could include politicians, it could include the media, and that has definitely raised eyebrows on Capitol Hill. Republicans, by and large, would like to be able to confirm Donald Trump's picks. They say that he was elected and he should have the right to name who he wants to these positions. But the reality is that that some of these nominees are going to be difficult for them, particularly someone who has said on the record that he wants to use the investigatory powers of the FBI to go after people who the president doesn't like.
All right, and a lot of news over that Thanksgiving holiday weekend. Nancy and Ed, thank you so much for breaking it all down for us. We appreciate it. And turning now to the Middle East, where a civil war is reigniting in Syria, and Russia is playing a major role. The Syrian military and the Kremlin conducted joint airstrikes today on areas that rebels took control of over the weekend. Fighters seized Syria's largest city, Aleppo, after a battle with troops loyal to dictator Bashar al-Assad. The conflict started in 2011, but there's been a stalemate for several years. Charlie Daggett joins us now from the Pentagon. Charlie, good to see you. Thanks for being here. So why is this civil war heating up right now? What is it about the timing?
Yeah, hey, Caitlin. So there are those here at the Pentagon who might describe it as exploiting a target of opportunity in military speak. You have to take a look at Syria's main allies, Russia, Iran, by extension, Hezbollah. Russians fighting its own wars. We know in Ukraine that's been a tremendous drain on manpower and military assets, including air power. That's critical. And it's just that the focus has been shifted elsewhere. Then, of course, is Iran that's been squaring off against Israel. The country itself has come under airstrikes. U.S. forces have been hitting Iranian-backed militias in both Iraq and Syria. So they're on the back foot. And then this might be one of the more critical pieces of the puzzle is Hezbollah itself, right? They had been deployed to Syria to support the regime, but we all know what's happened, right? They had to pull out and head to Lebanon in order to fight for their own survival. And then, of course, we have to remember the Syrian regime has come under attack. So for years, these groups have remained dormant. But they've been regrouping, rearming, waiting for the opportunity to launch a major offensive. And I have to say, this is a major offensive. They swept into Aleppo, obviously catching the Syrian army off guard.
And there are, as you mentioned, U.S. forces in Syria right now. I think the big question that a lot of Americans would have is how the Pentagon is responding here and trying to avoid any kind of deadly miscommunication, of course.
Yeah, there are roughly 900 U.S. forces in Syria. They're largely special operations forces, special forces. Pentagon sources we talked to today tell us they're largely concentrated in an area in northeast Syria. And their role is to stop ISIS from reemerging. It's called Operation Inherent Resolve. And we're told today that the commander of that operation has used the deconfliction line with Russia. That's to make sure that lines of communication stay open. It's very complicated on the ground there. I remember driving down the street, seeing a U.S. military convoy, which was then followed by a Russian convoy. Moments later, it was flanked by Russian helicopters. So the number one job for the U.S. military, as you pointed out, is force protection. So they'll have eyes all over Syria. They'll be seeing these Russian warplanes increasing their own activity. And this is a critical, vital way to ensure that U.S. and Russian forces avoid any mishaps, which is the whole reason that deconfliction line exists.
Yeah, I think a big question for Americans tonight. And Charlie, I know you've seen it all there for yourself as well. Thank you so much for your reporting.
Thanks, Caitlin.
Now to the conflict in Gaza. Hamas has released a propaganda video featuring an Israeli-American hostage. The undated video posted on the messaging service Telegram includes 20-year-old Adnan Alexander in it. He asks the president-elect Trump to negotiate for the freedom of the hostages. This was the first video of its kind shared in months. Israel's President Isaac Herzog met with Alexander's mother yesterday. And now that Hunter Biden has been pardoned, could January 6th defendants be next? Straight ahead, why some who stormed the Capitol are already confident a pardon is on the way. You're streaming America Decides. And welcome back to America Decides. Shortly after Hunter Biden was pardoned, President-elect Trump turned to social media to tie it to the January 6th cases. He wrote, quote, "Does the pardon given by Joe to Hunter include the J6 hostages who have now been imprisoned for years? Such an abuse and miscarriage of justice." Let's bring in our Scott McFarland, who has been covering the January 6th defendants for a while now for CBS News. Scott, good to see you. So as you know, and as our viewers know, Trump has long called these rioters prisoners. What do we know so far about his plans for pardons?
This really gets to the heart of a divide inside the progressive movement and advocates and activists who've championed some of what President Biden has done over the past 4 years. Some of them say this pardon of Hunter Biden isn't going to change Donald Trump's trajectory, that Trump has been promising pardons for January 6 defendants anyhow. Then there are others on the progressive side of things who say this may embolden Donald Trump to broaden the aperture and pardon even more January 6 defendants now, even those who were violent to police, even those who conspired seditiously to overthrow the government that day. No matter what, Donald Trump has been unequivocal. He is pledging some number of pardons for some of what he calls January 6 hostages. But to be clear, Caitlin, there's never been a clear dividing line Donald Trump has painted as to who he's cutting out and who he's keeping in on that list. There are 1,500 plus January 6 defendants, about 600 of whom have actually been sentenced to incarceration or prison. Nobody has been able to press Trump to specify who's in and who's out, and certainly whether President Biden's pardon of Hunter Biden changes that dividing line at all.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point there, Scott, about who is seeking these pardons as well. You know, Trump's victory seems like it could have impacted how the defendants are challenging these cases. Have they?
They certainly have. Over the past 72 hours, Caitlin, we've seen this flurry of court filings from January 6 defendants seeking their release from custody or seeking a change to their release conditions, arguing when Donald Trump comes in January 20th, 2025, they are going to get their pardons. They're arguing as much to the court, saying the pardons are a sure thing, so the court should hold off on further proceedings on the open criminal cases and perhaps release those who have closed cases, those who are already serving time or who are in pretrial detention pending trial. One of them is a man named Joseph Hutchinson of Florida, who filed a motion over the weekend which argues that he should be released from custody until his trial because, quote, "No one is going to flee from a trial that is never coming. I will await my pardon like any responsible person would." He is echoing the sentiment of any number of January 6 defendants who say the pardons are coming and the courts should dial back the cases. Expect the volume and the vitriol in those filings to increase between now and Inauguration Day.
Hard to believe that we're coming up on 4 years since January 6th. Scott McFarland, thank you very much. And blue states are gearing up for the Trump administration. Next, we'll take you to California, where Governor Gavin Newsom is hoping a special legislative session can make the state, quote, Trump-proof. We'll explain. You're streaming America Decides. President-elect Donald Trump's pick to serve as the next U.S. Defense Secretary met with senators on Capitol Hill today to bolster support for his confirmation, all while he contends with new allegations of misconduct. CBS News has confirmed that Pete Hegseth was forced to step down from a previous leadership role with a nonprofit due to accusations of financial mismanagement, sexual impropriety, and repeated intoxication while on the job. Nicole Killian joins us now from Capitol Hill. Nicole, good to see you. I know you have been running around the Capitol today because earlier today you asked Hegseth himself about these accusations against him, which of course were first reported by The New Yorker. I want to play a little bit of that.
When you were at Concerned Veterans for America, were you ever drunk while traveling on the job?
I'm not going to dignify that with a response.
I mean, can you respond to those allegations, sir? I don't know if you've read the New Yorker article, but there was also a whistleblower report that was conducted at the organization. Are you familiar with what that details?
I'm talking to all of the senators, and I look forward to those discussions.
Would you care to respond to the allegations, sir?
I look forward to talking to senators.
All right, Nicole, great work there. What other details can you tell us about these accusations?
Well, obviously, you know, this is something new that we continue to learn. But as you mentioned, CBS News has now learned that the Koch brothers ultimately did force Pete Hegseth out of that organization, Concerned Veterans for America. And this came after a series of allegations and concerns that were raised about potential financial impropriety, sexual misconduct, and the like. And so I did ask Mr. Hegseth why he resigned from the organization. Again, he did not directly address that. He just continued to say that he was here on Capitol Hill to meet with senators and that he was looking forward to these meetings. But obviously, this is yet another allegation on top of others that we reported just last month with respect to an allegation of sexual assault, which Hegseth has also denied, that stemming from a 2017 incident with a woman at a conference in Monterey, California. So, you know, this drip of information certainly could potentially make Hegseth's nomination more challenging. That being said, I did speak with Alabama Senator Tommy Tuberville earlier today, who met with Hegseth. He said that he intends to vote for him. He said that unequivocally. He said that he believes the Pentagon needs, in his words, a drill sergeant. He told me directly he had no concerns about the allegations that were detailed in The New Yorker. So while Mr. Hegseth does continue to enjoy some support here on Capitol Hill, unclear again if these new allegations will jeopardize his nomination going forward.
And they only have a handful of Republicans to lose there. Nicole, I want to ask you about some other activity on Capitol Hill because Trump's pick for Attorney General, Pam Bondi, was up on the Hill meeting with Chuck Grassley and Lindsey Graham. Why was she meeting with them, and what do we know about what happened in these meetings so far?
Well, again, I think we will continue to see a number of President-elect Trump's nominees here on Capitol Hill. You know, as you know, obviously with the inauguration set for January 20th, there's not a lot of time here for these nominees to meet with senators, as the President-elect has made clear that he kind of wants to be up and running on day one. And so part of that is going to rely heavily on many of these nominees getting confirmed. And, you know, even Republican leaders have said as soon as they are sworn in early January 3rd, you know, they want to start moving forward with this process of a confirmation hearing. So that is why there is a lot of activity here on Capitol Hill, whether it is Pete Hegseth, who was up here today, Pam Bondi, and I would expect there could be more nominees coming in the days ahead. Elise Stefanik was up here as well. But look, for Pam Bondi, this was really her first opportunity to meet with senators, her first opportunity to visit with lawmakers after being named, particularly after the withdrawal of Matt Gaetz, who was here on Capitol Hill last month, meeting with senators at the Capitol and then withdrawing from consideration shortly thereafter. So, you know, Chuck Grassley in particular, who will be heading the Senate Judiciary Committee, will be charged with that particular confirmation hearing. So that's why it was kind of critical for her to get some face time with him today. But so far, he sounds relatively enthusiastic about her nomination. Caitlin.
All right, no such thing as a slow December up there. Nicole Killian, thank you so much. And now to California, where state legislators returned to the Capitol today to kick off a special session. It was called by Governor Gavin Newsom last month to prepare for the incoming Trump administration. CBS News Sacramento investigative correspondent Julie Watts has more from the state capitol.
Hey, Caitlin, California is getting ready to gavel in a special session. Today, it's mostly pomp and circumstance. The freshman lawmakers are being sworn in, a lot of family and friends here. But at the end of this session, that is when we will officially gavel in the extraordinary session where Governor Gavin Newsom is asking the California legislature to consider additional funding to the tune of millions, hundreds of millions, to the DOJ to help fight against lawsuits by the Trump administration and file lawsuits against the Trump administration. Now, as you might imagine, there are many different opinions on this here in the Capitol, depending on who you talk to. Certainly, many folks today have pointed out to me that some 38% of Californians voted for President Trump. They are mindful of that. They are mindful of how California voters feel about policies, but they say they also are mindful that they want to protect things like California gun laws. They want to protect things like California's clean air policies. And so that is what they are preparing to do. There won't be a lot of decision making done today. In fact, probably no decision making done today. But over the next matter of weeks and months, they will come together with a plan and likely allocate money to the DOJ for what the governor has billed as Trump-proofing California. So again, this is just the beginning of what is likely to be a long, extraordinary special session.
And we will stay tuned. Julie Watts, thank you. And during his first administration, Trump gave key seats at the table to family members, and it's more of the same this time around. Up next, the key diplomatic posts given to members of his extended family and what it tells us about Trump's foreign policy plans. You're streaming America Decides. Welcome back to America Decides. President-elect Trump is giving key diplomatic posts to the fathers-in-law of his two daughters. He's tapped Charles Kushner to serve as ambassador to France. He's also received a presidential pardon from Trump 4 years ago. Now, Kushner was convicted on several counts, including tax evasion and in a sex scandal revenge plot to lure and intimidate his brother-in-law. Trump has also tapped Massad Boulos to serve as senior advisor on Arab and Middle Eastern affairs. His son, Michael Boulos, is married to Tiffany Trump. For more on all of this, let's bring in our political panel, Joel Payne and Maura Gillespie. Joel is a CBS News contributor and a Democratic strategist, and Maura previously served as an advisor to former Republican House Speaker John Boehner and former Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger. Thank you both for being here. We appreciate it. Maura, I want to start with you. Let's talk a little bit about these new selections that Trump made. What does it say about him that he is kind of giving some of these positions to members of his extended family?
It's no surprise in Washington, D.C. that it's not always what you know, but it's who you know. And Trump certainly seems to be taking that to the nth degree here in some of his appointments. I think I'll leave it to the senators to decide during these several, during confirmation hearings to see, the substance behind these selections, aside from just the loyalty factor, which that's not a criticism. Obviously, you want to have people around you who you know that will support you as president and will do, kind of what it is that you're hoping to accomplish in your administration. So that part isn't the criticism. I think, though, then it becomes what's the qualifications that they have to have those positions, and especially in something that's as important as the Middle East, and especially what we're seeing play out right now. Some of the selections that are being chosen do cause, I think, a lot of Republicans, but also Americans wide, cause for concern as what their objectives may be and who's really got the ear of the president-elect at this moment.
Yeah, and Joel, as Maura alluded to, I mean, ambassador positions are often given to big donors or, close, friends or family members. But what's interesting about the Kushner appointment is that he received that pardon. So that brings me back to you as a Democrat. What are you making of Biden's pardon of his son?
I think I'm just trying to process, what does Donald Trump think is the reason why he won? Donald Trump has like an opportunity with this second term to kind of change some public perception about himself, but it doesn't really seem like so far he's interested in doing that. Like if Donald Trump thinks the reason why he won is because the American people want him to go wild, go MAGA, hog wild, go as far right, go as extremist as he wants, bring in all of his loyalists, have them do his bidding for him. Okay, that's a read of the electorate. I don't think that's an accurate one. And I think that Donald Trump has a history of overreaching. He overreached in his first term. It seems like he's poised to do the same thing here. And I do think that the American people are going to have an opportunity here to start to get a sense of what Donald Trump views his charges in the second term. Is it to look out for them and their best interests, or is it to look out for himself and his best interests?
We've had several Democrats who have been very critical of Biden's decision to pardon his own son after he repeatedly said he wouldn't, then he did. How are Democrats feeling about this and kind of where it leaves Biden's legacy, but also where it leaves kind of the Democratic Party?
This is a mixed opinion issue, and I don't want to make it seem like it's simple. Presidents have the pardon power. They use it very freely. This is not uncommon. This is not illegal. This is not outside the law how he's using it. It is politically unhelpful right now for Democrats in a moment where they're processing the results of the last election as people don't like Washington insider business, the fact that Washington looks out for Washington. This can be read that way. I also think it's fair to say that Hunter Biden was mistreated by the criminal justice system. He was targeted unfairly. He received penalties and he received scrutiny that he might not have received if he wasn't the president's son. And Republicans have essentially run a multi-year campaign knowing that this is someone who struggled with substance abuse to essentially try to goad him back into substance abuse. I mean, that is ugly. And so I think you have to be able to hold both of those things true. Republicans, I believe, were a bit unfair with how they put the spotlight on Hunter Biden. I also think that Joe Biden probably did a thing here that's politically not going to be helpful for his party, that's going to have to deal with this in the aftermath of him being in the presidency.
Yeah, and is in the process of rebuilding after these big losses. Maura, I want to ask, too, about some of these other nominations that the president-elect has put forward. I mean, Kash Patel really sent shockwaves through Washington with that pick, even though it wasn't surprising. Obviously, if you listen to the way that Donald Trump campaigned over the past year and wanting to essentially disrupt most Washington institutions, especially the Justice Department. I'm wondering how, Republicans are reacting to that pick. I mean, it seems like there's some broad support there, but still, while they have the majority, Republicans do have a relatively narrow margin. I mean, they can only lose 3 senators.
And I think with a pick like Kash Patel, and I think there are a couple others that are going to have a really hard time convincing the Senate that they are up for this job and that they are qualified. And I would say Tulsi Gabbard is also one of those that I am deeply concerned about, especially as you're watching what's playing out currently in Syria and her affinity for Bashar al-Assad. So I think that it's really important, for senators to take these confirmation hearings and really dig deep into what's going on and the stances like Kash Patel has had, conspiracy theories, targeting members of the former president and president-elect's administration, but also President Biden's administration. He has a whole list in his book about who he would go after. And so I think it's really important that we take this very seriously. Again, these positions aren't, I don't want to say just, but an ambassador position. These are leading our intelligence, our security, and our safety of the FBI. So those are 2 positions that are about American safety. And we have people who are only looking out to one, Donald Trump, or in Tulsi Gabbard's case, has really questionable stances when it comes to Russia, Syria, and Iran. So it's definitely things that the Senate will have to take a good look at. I don't think that Republicans wide necessarily know a whole ton about these 2 people, and that's the Senate's job, is to educate America and ask the questions that need to be asked.
Yeah, and thankfully for everyone, the hearings are all public. Joel and Maura, thank you so much. We appreciate it. And President-elect Trump's winter White House is becoming a new hub of power in the nation. Next, why lobbyists are flocking to Florida as Trump prepares to return to Washington. You're streaming America Decides. And more than a month before he returns to the White House, President-elect Trump is holding his own versions of state dinners in Florida. Last night, the president-elect dined with the wife of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu at his golf resort in West Palm Beach. And just 2 days before, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau also had dinner with Trump at his Mar-a-Lago resort. Trudeau said that they had, quote, an excellent conversation. Dave Leventhal joins us now. He's a contributor at Business Insider. Dave, you wrote a really fascinating article for Business Insider about how Washington lobbyists are now essentially flocking to Florida. I'm wondering, why that is, kind of what this moment represents and how it might transform kind of how lobbying's done.
So if we were having this conversation 8 years ago, we'd be talking about New York City and Trump Tower and how everyone was going to make their plea to Donald Trump or kiss the ring or have their audience. And that was all going to be right along Fifth Avenue, right? Well, things have changed, and that has all migrated south to Florida. And yeah, hey, Mar-a-Lago, not a new thing here, and hardly news that Donald Trump has a presence in Florida. But the power center has truly shifted from New York to Florida and from, in a large sense, Washington, D.C. to Florida, in that Donald Trump is sweeping into office saying, hey, look, I'm trying to kick everyone out of Washington, D.C., and what's good for Florida is good for Trump, and what's good for Trump seems to be good for Florida right now, at least at this stage of the early transition game.
Yeah, and so many key players in his campaign and now to be in his administration have been based in Florida. You write that the consensus among lobbyists is that anyone who hopes to have influence with Trump this time around will have to dispense with the traditional lobbying conventions. What exactly does that mean?
If you want to get to Donald Trump, you have to go to where Donald Trump is. So, of course, he'll be in the White House for a good amount of the time, but this is somebody who is largely going to go to Florida when he's not in Washington, D.C. And yes, we used to call it the Winter White House during his first term, and that was Trump 1.0. So maybe everyone's thinking, this is just going to kind of be Trump 2.0. One lobbyist I spoke to said, nah, this is going to be Trump 5.0. So you can really expect that Mar-a-Lago is going to be bigger and play an even greater role in the governance of the United States. And if you're a lobbyist and you are representing large corporations or various special interests that have so much money that's tied up in the federal government appropriations game, or you just want to be on Donald Trump's good side, you better get your Mar-a-Lago membership. You better get the golf tickets. You better have a presence in Florida in a way that you might have never even thought of in that first Trump term.
Yeah, and what is, I mean, obviously, as you mentioned, over the past, nearly a decade, Mar-a-Lago has become such an iconic place. West Palm Beach has become such an iconic place because of Donald Trump. But as you're talking to these lobbyists, what are the opportunities exactly that they are seeing here that they may not have had previously with Donald Trump?
Well, let's remember that Mar-a-Lago is a business for Donald Trump in addition to his residence. So if you want to, for example, have a presence there that Donald Trump is going to notice and get on his good side financially as well as politically, it's probably not going to hurt your cause to have your event at Mar-a-Lago or one of his properties, or do something that's going to put yourself on the radar in a way that would be sort of non-traditional by standard K Street Washington lobbying standards. And that's kind of a big deal. And let us not forget that Donald Trump, he no longer has that property 5 blocks away from the White House, the Trump Hotel here in Washington, D.C. So Mar-a-Lago, in a way, because of the absence of the Trump Hotel in D.C., plays an even bigger role in Trumplandia, if you will, just by virtue of it being the biggest game in town.
So maybe the swamp has moved further south down to Florida. I mean, there are all sorts of questions, of course, of conflict of interest. But in terms of what these lobbyists are seeing, kind of walk us through some opportunities that they're kind of sensing. What kinds of industries are going to be big in terms of trying to curry favor with the president?
If you care about tariffs, if you care about taxes and trade, if you're an electric car company, I mean, some of the companies and some of the industries that are really kind of feeling heat right now because Donald Trump has put a target on you, that's going to be a big deal, and all the more reason for some of these corporations to lobby up, not only in D.C., on Capitol Hill in the White House, but in Florida, too.
Maybe some more offices opening up in South Florida.
Without a doubt.
See. Dave, thank you so much for your time.
Welcome.
We appreciate it. And candidates expecting to be the next DNC chair are promising some big changes. What they're saying about the future of the party after big losses this year. You're streaming America Decides. And welcome back to America Decides. The field in the race to lead the Democratic National Committee is growing. The chair of the Wisconsin Democratic Party, Ben Wickler, and former Maryland Senate candidate Robert Hooton jumped in on Sunday. Whoever wins is expected to chart a new course for the party after those bruising losses this year. Hunter Woodall joins us now to break this all down. Hunter, good to see you. So the Democratic Party is kind of in the wilderness right now. They're trying to figure out where to go next after these losses this past presidential election cycle. The DNC race seems to represent at least one way to kind of figure out where the party's going to go. What have we learned so far? What are you kind of looking for?
That's absolutely the case, Caitlin. I mean, what's so bizarre here is, the DNC, it's not a massive race. There's only around 500 members of the Democratic National Committee, but this position will have immense influence. And when you look at the tensions going out here, it's, what is the vision of the Democratic Party moving forward? And that's the big question here. But it's also this matter of how are you going to reshape the party in the next 4 years? Because they obviously want to win back the White House. These are longer-term questions, longer-term issues, and the candidates in this race, it's really going to be a difficult dynamic that they're facing because obviously Democrats, especially the ones I've talked to on Capitol Hill, they're fairly demoralized right now by the Trump victory.
Yeah, and what are those kind of tensions that they're going to be kind of exploring through this DNC race? I mean, it seems kind of like a wonky position, but it's absolutely crucial in terms of raising money, in terms of building out state parties as well. When the party's kind of looking where to go, where's the tension right now?
Well, this is always one of those matters where you find that push, give and pull between progressives and moderates. So, there's a thought of, okay, do Democrats need to go back towards the center? Then progressives are saying, hey, you campaign, VP Harris campaigned with Liz Cheney in those final weeks. They don't think that helped with voters so much. So that's the kind of tension you're likely going to see here. But also, it can be less about ideology and more about what's your background here? And we have candidates who have had success in state races, but there's not like that marquee name in the race so far. I mean, you have Martin O'Malley, the former Maryland governor, but he obviously was barely registered in the 2016 presidential race. Yeah. So in the race like this, these are folks who tend to work more behind the scenes, but have that massive ability to really reshape the party moving forward. We can't forget, DNC really reshaped the primary calendar to favor Joe Biden, after the 2020 presidential election. And they'll likely have to figure out questions about that, coming up.
Yeah, and the Trump team was instrumental in rebuilding or building the RNC in that candidate's image as well. So what's the process moving forward? How do they select a DNC chair?
Well, this is a short window, and it's, I'm looking at the DNC released some details a few weeks back. They'll have this contest on February 1st, and it sounds like there'll be some candidate forums next month in January. And this will really be an interesting idea of, there's no Democratic leader right now, really, when you think of what we're seeing. You obviously have the leaders in the House and the Senate, but the thought of, we haven't really seen that kind of resistance-like movement we saw after the 2016 presidential election. So this will be kind of the first proxy battle between what we're likely going to see for the next few years between progressives, moderates, but also people who really want to try and rebrand what it means to be a Democrat in America today.
Yeah, a big outstanding question, and that's a really good point about not having a leader at this point. So we will see. Hunter Woodall, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it. And it may still be Cyber Monday, but most Americans are gearing up for the winter holiday season. And that includes the President and the First Lady. Jill Biden announced her final holiday theme for the White House, a season of peace and light. The First Lady wanted to focus the holiday around the power of community and kindness towards others. This year's decorations include 83 Christmas trees, more than 28,000 ornaments, and over 165,000 holiday lights. It took about 300 volunteers over the span of a week to pull this all off. What a sight indeed. And visitors entering the White House this winter can purchase the annual Christmas ornament. You see here it's honoring Jimmy Carter, who is our oldest living president. The gold finish features an anchor referring to Carter's time in the Navy. A purchase comes with a book on Carter's presidency. And that does it for us today. We'll be back with another edition of America Decides tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern. The Daily Report starts right now.